report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping have agreed in Busan to cut U.S. tariffs on China from 57% to 47% in exchange for Beijing's actions on the fentanyl trade and pause on rare earth export curbs. Trump has also announced he will visit China in April next year after the two-hour summit, capping his high-profile Asia tour. Russian strikes on Ukraine overnight has killed 1 person and wounded 17. The strikes have reportedly caused a major power outrage across the country. U.S. President Donald Trump had ordered the U.S. military to immediately resume testing nuclear weapons for the first time in 33 years. This comes just after Russia's announcement of successful nuclear tests. More than 119 people, including police, have died in Brazil's deadliest police raid targeting Rio's Commando Vermelho gang. Now, Rio residents have taken to streets against the deadliest police raid. The centrist D66 party has won in the Dutch elections. D66 leader now looks set to take the lead in forming the next government and could become Netherlands' youngest prime minister and first LGBTQ prime minister of Netherlands. In a separate development, Danish shipping giant Maersk has announced its APM Terminals unit will invest $2 billion to expand port infrastructure in India's Gujarat Pipavav port, while the United States has granted India a 6-month sanctions exemption to continue operations at Iran's strategic Chabahar port, according to statements from New Delhi. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun ordered the army to confront any Israeli incursion in the country's south after an Israeli raid killed a municipal worker. Aoun has said that the military must defend Lebanese territory and protect civilians, according to a statement from the presidency in Beirut. Hurricane Melissa has killed more than 30 people, while Haiti has recorded the highest number of deaths so far. The death toll may rise in Jamaica and Cuba. In Gaza, Hamas's armed wing, the Ezzedine al-Qassam Brigades, has announced it will hand over the remains of 2 more Israeli hostages' bodies as part of a U.S.-brokered ceasefire agreement. The group has confirmed in a statement on its Telegram channel that the bodies will be returned at 4 p.m. local time. So far, Hamas has handed back the remains of 15 out of 28 bodies under the deal. Meanwhile, the IDF is preparing to receive the bodies and transfer them to the National Institute for Forensic Medicine for identification. The handover is expected to take place amid ongoing tensions in the region as efforts for a broader ceasefire continue. In Gaza, Hamas's armed wing, the Ezzedine al-Qassam Brigades, have announced it will hand over the remains of 2 more Israeli hostages as part of a U.S.-brokered ceasefire agreement. The group has confirmed in a statement on its Telegram channel that the bodies will be returned at 4 p.m. local time. So far, Hamas has handed back the remains of 15 out of 28 bodies under the deal. Meanwhile, the IDF is preparing to receive the bodies and transfer them to the National Institute for Forensic Medicine for identification. The handover is expected to take place amid ongoing tensions in the region as efforts for a broader ceasefire continue. Now for this discussion, we welcome Matthew Vadam. He's an American journalist, joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Matthew, for joining us again. Good to see you.
Hi. Great.
Matthew, what do you think, how is ceasefire's first phase, or phase 1, holding on? And do you think that they are ready to move to phase 2?
I don't know if they're ready to move to phase 2. The ceasefire has been very shaky so far. It's been interrupted by, there have been some attacks during the ceasefire, and it may ultimately last, but right now it's not off to a very good beginning. It does not help that Hamas has not been returning the bodies of dead Israeli hostages according to the schedule, and Israel and the United States are not happy about this. And I understand Hamas has been complaining that because of the bombing, because of Israel's attacks on Gaza, that it's difficult to locate all the bodies, but that seems like a pretty feeble excuse to me. If they didn't think they were, if the bodies were going to be difficult to return, then maybe they should have written provisions into the agreement to give them more time to do it. So it just seems to me like a stalling tactic, and I think that Hamas. I've never thought that Hamas was sincere. I don't think Hamas intends to honor the peace deal ultimately, and that they are just taking their time because they want to drag things out to have more time to rearm and to reorganize their campaign of terrorism against Israel. But I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, and maybe the peace deal will hold. But I don't think it's off to a very good start.
And Matthew, what do you think is the next? What do you think which country should mediate, or America should do or could do to make sure that this fragile ceasefire, this situation holds?
Well, I think that right now the U.S. government and President Trump are applying pressure to Hamas, and right now, President Trump has said that if Hamas does not cooperate and hand over the bodies, that there may be. I don't think he specified what he was going to do, but he implied that there might be further. He might be okay with further military strikes against Hamas to force their compliance. So I think that right now the United States and Israel are applying pressure to Hamas to cooperate. And I think that at the moment, that's about all that they can. I think that's about all that they can do at the moment.
And do you think, Matthew, do you think that Qatar or Turkey could play a role in mediating or making sure that Hamas disarms and this ceasefire
That
holds?
a couple of what?
The Hamas disarms. Oh, the countries, I mean Turkey.
Is Hamas going to disarm? They say they're going to disarm, but right now they've been very busy on a campaign of retribution against people who were accused of being collaborators with Israel. So they've been on a killing spree, murdering their own people in Gaza right now. So, I don't think they're too eager to disarm, but, time will tell on this point. They're not, Hamas was created to destroy Israel. That was their pledge, to kill Jews. They want to do that. They want to eliminate Israel. They don't want, it's more important to them than creating a Palestinian state. They want to eradicate Israel, wipe it off the map. And so if they are, and I think the peace deal gets in the way. And I don't think their efforts are sincere. I think they want to rearm and keep attacking Israel. So I'm not optimistic about the prospects of the peace deal lasting over time.
With that, I would like to thank Matthew Wadham for joining us all the way from Washington as a journalist and sharing that insight. Now we move on to our next news. For the first time in 2 years, in Al-Azhar University in Gaza has reopened its doors to students. This took place on October 27th and acts as a powerful symbol of hope after war and devastation. The campus, once scarred by conflict, is now filled with students registering for classes, many for the first time since the 2023 Israel-Hamas war brought education to a halt. Among them, first-year medical student Shahad says returning to in-person learning feels like a new beginning. Before the war, Gaza had more than 50 universities serving over 200,000 students, most now damaged or destroyed. At Al-Azhar, bullet holes and shattered labs still mark the walls, but staffs are salvaging what they can to restart teaching. Let's in fact listen into what some of the students have said.
كان التعليم صعب كتير والتعليم إلكتروني كتير صعب إنه في معلومات بدنا نحاول نفهمها فكانت توصلنا بشكل بسيط المعلومات اللي على الإنترنت.
هو أعطانا شعور الأمل من جديد بعد هالدمار اللي صار فينا في السنتين الحرب، إنه ترجع اليوم مجاهي ولا تشوف جماعتك موجودة لسه، هذا بيديك أمل وحياة جديدة إن أنت تبدأ لسه في أمل إنه نستمر في الحياة.
Now we move on to Europe. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has stated that he sees Turkey close at the side of the European Union after holding talks with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Ankara. The two leaders met for bilateral discussions focused on migration, trade, and regional cooperation. Merz has stated that both countries want to make more progress on repatriations, a key issue in Europe's ongoing migration debate. Earlier, the German leader visited the mausoleum of modern Turkey's founder, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, and had held meetings with business leaders in Ankara. The visit marks Merz's first official trip to Turkey since taking office, signaling a renewed push to strengthening Ankara-Berlin ties. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Matthew Vadam. He's an American journalist, joins us live from Washington. Thank you very much, Matthew, for staying with us. Matthew, how significant is this Germany and Ankara, Turkey moving closer to each other, and what do you think will come next?
I don't know what's going to come next, but I know it's probably significant because, Turkey has been pressing to become a full member of the European Union for a long time. And they want it, Turkey wants it very badly, even though, only a tiny little smidgen, only a tiny little piece of Turkey is actually on the European continent. So, but they want to be part of Europe very badly, and I don't really understand it because Turkey is a Muslim country. And Erdogan is an Islamist leader, and I don't see what he has in common with the peoples of the European Union. But they want it. I guess they think it's going to improve the standard of living for Turkey. Erdogan has largely abandoned the approach of the great leaders before him, such as Ataturk, who tried to secularize Turkey and separate mosque and state, and he has largely abandoned that. So, but he thinks it's very important that Turkey be part of the European Union, I guess mostly for economic reasons and perhaps for some military reasons. I'm not so sure that the European Union is wise to embrace Turkey, and I think that it's still not clear what is going to happen. Germany, I guess, over time has grown closer to Turkey. There are many Turkish immigrants in Germany. And I think that there is a kind of kinship between the two countries, even though they're still a little bit wary of each other. So the fact that they are talking and meeting and is a sign that they are moving closer together. Whether this will result in Turkey being granted full membership in the European Union, and how long this will take, I really cannot say.
Thank you for sharing that, Matthew. And Matthew, what do you think? What does Turkey bring to the table to be considered to be added to European Union? And what do you think is the sticking point for Turkey to be welcomed?
Okay, well, the sticking point would be on the European Union side, not on the Turkey side. Turkey wants to be part of the EU. It views itself as a modern it aspires to be a European-style country, and it thinks that this will help to modernize the country and improve its standing worldwide. Stumbling blocks are, whether the culture of Turkey is compatible with the culture of European countries, which are, with a few exceptions, Christian and not Muslim. There are some pockets of Muslims in Eastern European countries and in the Balkan Peninsula. So it's a different culture, a different way of living that, and the two cultures much of the time don't get along together. There's also the question of how, I guess, Turkey would participate in the European Parliament, and what form its participation in the governance of the European Union would take. So I think there's a lot of details that still need to be worked out before Turkey can be granted full membership in the EU, and presumably the leaders of Turkey and Germany are discussing these very topics.
With that, I would like to thank Matthew Badham for joining us and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Asia. Heavy rain has hit Vietnam's coastal provinces, including Hoi An, a UNESCO World Heritage Site with up to 1.7 meters of rainfall in only 24 hours. At least 10 people have died and 8 are missing, according to the Environmental Ministry. Residents have navigated waist-deep floods using boats or wading through streets with ground floods, floors of houses and shops submerged. Tran Thi Ki, a resident, has stated that her family's furniture, kitchenware and refrigerators were almost completely underwater. More than 128,000 houses in 5 central provinces have been inundated, with water reaching up to 3 meters in some areas. Now for this discussion, we welcome Desmond Majekodunmi. He's a political and environmental activist, joins us live from Lagos. Thank you very much, Desmond, for joining us again. Good to see you. Desmond, we have been talking environmental tragedy with you on this channel so many times, and even now looking again at this, how is climate change influences this increasingly intensifying and frequency of extreme rainfall, especially looking at this Vietnam's flooding?
Well, the reality is that climate change is coming about because of global warming, and what is causing the Earth to warm beyond normal average temperature, because this Earth has been operating on a particular average temperature for eons upon eons. Just like the human body, we have an average temperature. And if it goes too low, but particularly if it goes too high, even if it's just 1 degree, we know there's a problem. By the time it gets to 1.5 to 2 degrees, it's a really serious problem. And if our body has a temperature of over 2.5 degrees to 3 degrees for any consistent period of time, it's unlikely that we shall survive. And we can liken the Earth to the living metabolism that we call the human body. And what's happening is that we human beings, through our irresponsible actions, originally maybe just through ignorance, but then when we were told during the Industrial Revolution 150 years ago, that's when we started burning coal and getting the energy from the coal to start driving machinery. And very soon after burning the coal, we realized, whoa, burning this fossil fuel gives us a poison. And it actually kills people if you breathe it in. I mean, you're not going to have the fumes of your car coming into your bedroom, are you? Because it'll take you out because it's poisonous. But not only is it poisonous to mammalian life, it's upsetting the balance of this Earth's atmosphere that makes this the only livable planet that we've been able to come across. Probably there are some others around amongst the hundreds of millions that are there. So this is a very unique planet because of its atmosphere, and we're clogging it up with these heat-trapping gases, particularly the CO2 coming from burning fossil fuel. And the scientists told us decades ago that if we continue this practice, we're going to really cause catastrophic consequences. And one of those consequences is what we're actually seeing now in Vietnam, let alone what has just happened in Jamaica. Oh, a hurricane just hit Jamaica called Hurricane Melissa. And this hurricane had a speed that had never, ever been recorded from a hurricane before. 385 kilometers per hour at the high level. You know, Jamaica has some high peaks. Unprecedented buildup of that speed, simply because there is more heat in the water. And when you have more heat, you have more energy. And when you have more energy, you're gonna have bigger winds that are driving far more water because the more heat has evaporated the water. It's the simplest of science in that regard. Although it's quite complex when you relate it to actual, what it does in the atmosphere in terms of trapping certain amounts of heat from the sun. That's quite deep. But I think everybody learns this in their mother's kitchen. That when you add heat to water, you energize that water. And that's exactly what we've been doing for decades and decades. And the scientists have been telling us, look, stop this, find the alternatives. But unfortunately, it's very profitable. It's very, very profitable to be making people acquire these materials, particularly the petrol and the diesel and the coal. Very profitable industry. We want to make the money.
Yes.
At what expense? You're going to make the money at the expense of wrecking this Earth's incredible, miraculous life support system, which is being driven by its amazing mix of gases in the atmosphere. So this is the main problem. The reality is that it is bad, and it is going to get worse very soon, even if we change our attitudes over the next few years. And if we don't change after it gets worse soon, and let it continue like this for maybe another decade or so, it then becomes really, really serious, catastrophic, unstoppable. So basically, it's just nature, telling humanity, hey, wake up, break away from your addiction to, material pursuits, to sense gratification. Wake up away from that and don't do what you're doing to us, to nature and her wonderful, wonderful systems. Change your ways, change your attitudes, and don't be bringing this terrible karma upon yourselves.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Desmond, for sharing that very powerful message with us on NewsX World. Now we move on to our next news. Lithuania's Prime Minister Inga Ruginin has stated that Poland has agreed to postpone the reopening of its border crossings with Belarus amid renewed security concerns. She has stated that her Polish counterpart Donald Tusk reached to the decision after talks on Wednesday to coordinate their actions on the Belarus frontier. Lithuania shut its land border with Belarus earlier this week after reports of smuggling balloons crossing into its territory, a move it says will remain in place until the end of November. Poland had planned to reopen 2 more crossings next month, but will now delay the decision. Meanwhile, Latvia has stated that it's also prepared to close its only remaining border crossings with Belarus if the situation worsens. Now we move on and we stay in Europe. In a historic first, France's National Assembly has passed a motion proposed by Marine Le Pen's far-right National Rally, signaling a dramatic shift in French politics. The non-binding resolution, adopted by just one vote, 185 to 184, urges government to repeal a 1968 agreement with Algeria that eases immigration for Algerian nationals. Hailing the day as historic, Marine Le Pen, National Rally parliamentary leader, has stated the following.
Qu'on peut qualifier d'historique pour le Rassemblement national, puisqu'il vient de faire voter pour la première fois dans une de ses niches un texte qui est extrêmement important pour nous parce qu'il nous apparaît être important pour notre pays. Cette résolution demandant la suppression de cette convention franco-algérienne de 68, nous la défendons depuis très longtemps. Nous considérons qu'il n'y a plus rien aujourd'hui qui justifie le maintien de cette convention. Et très objectivement, je vois que la gauche est mauvaise perdante, puisqu'elle multiplie les hurlements, les insultes, les diffamations, les rappels au règlement. Il faut qu'ils comprennent que la démocratie est ainsi faite que lorsqu'il y a une voix de plus pour voter un texte, eh bien ce texte passe.
Though symbolic, the outcome marks the first time ever that a national rally proposal has been approved in Parliament, breaking the long-standing cordon sanitaire that kept mainstream parties from aligning with the far right. Support came not only from Le Pen's bloc, but also from center-right Horizon's lawmakers and some centrists, while many from President Emmanuel Macron's Renaissance Party were absent, allowing the motion to pass. Left-wing parties blasted the vote as a dangerous normalization of extremism, warning it legitimizes anti-immigrant policies. Cyrielle Chatelain, Green parliamentary leader, countered Le Pen's claim by stating the following.
Alors moi, je lance un avis de recherche. Où est Gabriel Attal? Où sont les députés macronistes? Ce qu'on vient vivre dans l'hémicycle, c'est inacceptable, c'est insupportable. L'absence des macronistes a donné une victoire au Rassemblement national sur un texte raciste, sur un texte qui remet en cause nos relations entre la France et l'Algérie. Peut-on me dire ce que Gabriel Attal, qui se prétend présidentiable, avait d'autre chose à faire ce matin que d'être dans l'hémicycle pour défendre la question internationale, l'honneur de la France, pour ne pas laisser de victoire à l'extrême droite? Enfin, très sincèrement, ce qu'on vient de vivre est insupportable. Leur absence est absolument minable. Gabriel Attal qui se planque en n'étant pas là, qui ne dit jamais un mot dans l'hémicycle, en fait, à un moment, ça suffit.
Now we move on to our next news. Hurricane Melissa has left a trail of destruction and loss across the Caribbean, emerging as one of the most powerful Atlantic storms in more than 150 years. At least 30 people have been killed, though officials warn the final death toll may rise as rescue teams continue to assess the damage and search for the victims. Jamaica has suffered the most brutal impact, with Melissa becoming the strongest hurricane ever recorded to make landfall over there. The storm's violent winds plunged most of the country into darkness, knocking out power and crippling essential services. Melissa's strength was fueled by unusually warm Caribbean waters and favorable atmospheric conditions, which allowed the system to intensify rapidly and build immense force before sweeping across the region. Now for this discussion, we welcome Claude Mills. He's a journalist, joins us live from Kingston, Jamaica. Thank you very much, Claude, for joining us. Welcome to NewsX World. Now, what more can you
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Claude, what more can you tell us about this and how are Caribbean nations preparing for these powerful hurricanes?
Well, we try to be as prepared as possible because our region has always been plagued by hurricanes, so we do the best we can in terms of our infrastructure. So most persons, they build concrete structures with hurricane-resistant roofs to withstand the storms based on their ability to buy such materials and to procure such buildings. So we are well versed in surviving hurricanes, but every now and then we get a monster hurricane like what happened with Hurricane Beryl last year that devastated Grenada. And this year, it's our turn, so to speak, to bear the brunt of a catastrophic, almost insurvivable storm. So thank God Jamaica, the majority of Jamaicans were spared the savagery of what happened, but right now we have over 400,000 persons who are without power, without access to telecommunications, who are cut off from their communities, who are marooned. We have downed trees, we have live power lines, we have devastation. And, we can have a bigger catastrophe if the authorities don't move fast enough to provide social services to combat possible disease, malaria, mosquitoes, waterborne illnesses. So we need help. We need water filtration systems. We need people to come in and help us provide food for these communities. So, we do the best that we can with our meager resources, but we are at the mercy of environmental factors that are outside of our control, right? So as the famous philosopher said, we can't control events, but we can control the perception of events. So as an island nation, we can just move with tenacity and strength to rebuild in this difficult time. But we have devastated communities. A community called Black River, its streets inundated to a large degree with debris. We have services like the fire station and the police station, which have been devastated and flattened by the hurricane storms. We have iconic hotels like Jake's in Treasure Beach that has been decimated. We have beautiful communities like Treasure Beach, which is a quaint coastal town, which is just devastated. So it's rough, but we are keen to rebuild. There's an aerial footage of what transpired after the storm that is really heartbreaking, and our nation bleeds right now, but we are resilient and we will rise again.
And Claude, how is this Brazilian government helping to make sure that the regions vulnerable to climate change will be helped and they will be prepared for in case of next disaster?
Well, our government is very strict on zoning codes, how people build structures. That's one way. And they have been very proactive as it relates to environmental changes in our communities. Like they regulate shipping and regulate fishing in certain regulated areas. So they do their best to combat. But they have meager resources. Face it. I mean, what can an island nation do about warmer temperatures in the Caribbean Sea? No nation can do anything about a hurricane that sits in the Caribbean Sea for hours and days, building, getting more powerful and more deadly by the second. Nobody can litigate against that. So most they can do is govern the response to such a potential catastrophe in terms of, putting in place resources to protect its people, providing shelters. Because right now we have at least 30,000 people who are in shelters across the island. But the damage, luckily, was restricted to 3 major parishes: St. James, Westmoreland, and St. Elizabeth. The population of St. Elizabeth is like 150,000 people. Westmoreland is like 140. and St. James like 180,000. St. James is where the famous Montego Bay is located. So we have over 400, almost 500,000 people in this region of Jamaica who have been severely affected, some of whom are homeless, some of whom are marooned. So as it relates to climate change, there's nothing much that the island nation can do about warmer temperatures and more powerful hurricanes. This has been going on for a while. And we are just almost powerless to do anything about it. We can probably advocate and lobby more powerful nations to be more careful of the carbon footprint that they put on this island, on this country, this planet that we all inhabit. But what can we really do? There's nothing much that we can do. We can just try to protect our people as best as we can. And in this catastrophe, what they are really doing now is trying to save lives.
Yes.
We're exceedingly lucky because up to this point we've only had like reports of 5 deaths so far. So we've been very, very lucky so far in terms of human loss of life, you know?
Yes. Claudia, thank you very much for joining us all the way from Jamaica.